Before we start, we all, I believe, want to express our appreciation to all Tazewell County law enforcement officers. To both candidates, your service is very appreciated.
Yeah.
Our format is that we'll give both candidates 5 minutes to make the case for their candidacy. We'll follow those remarks with questions prepared by the Morton Tea Party leadership team, and we will manage the time to make sure that we get the questions submitted from the audience. Both candidates will have the opportunity to answer the questions. Mr. Eeten will go first with the initial comments, and we'll alternate which candidate says each question first. So, Mr. Eeten, why should voters vote for you?
Well, stand. I'm a little bit more comfortable standing. I appreciate the opportunity from the Morton Tea Party to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to talk about why our case for sheriff. And I would say that for me, this is something that happened many months back as I started thinking about the possibility of running for sheriff. A little bit about me. I have been a small business owner for 16 years, and I have worked very hard in a number of different ways. My business has taken me all over the United States in a lot of different areas. Part of my experience with that business is working with unions. A lot of times we would go into a venue, and the business that I ran was a production company. And so we would set up shows in multiple venues, union venues throughout the nation. And one of my responsibilities was to advance all of those shows and to make sure that everything was lined up. And what people don't know a lot of times is when you show up to a venue and you see a concert set up, you see sound systems and lighting systems and video projection systems. People don't always understand the work that goes into that and all the people behind the scenes. And my job was to coordinate with all of the unions that were involved. Sometimes to put on a show like that, you're dealing with 3, sometimes 4 or 5 different unions, and to make sure that we had everything in line to where not only did we have a successful show, that we were within budget, and that we also were making the unions happy with what is going on. They knew what we were doing, we knew what they were doing, and that sort of thing. My business experience led me into my passion of law enforcement, which is what I've had my whole life. I wanted to be a police officer from, ever since I can remember, to be quite honest. And it was something that I was very passionate about. So I pursued that opportunity. It's been something I've done for the last 12 years. And quite frankly, it's been probably the best ride of my life so far. Out of all the experiences that I've had in my life, one being a youth pastor, business owner, I can tell you being a police officer has been the most rewarding. In law enforcement, we have a lot of challenges today, and I definitely believe and am passionate about my ability to bring people together. I believe in my vision for the future of the Sheriff's Office and law enforcement in Tazewell County. And I believe that more than anything, that we can unite people together and to work towards the always changing needs in law enforcement, and to make sure that we engage with the public, that we communicate with the public, and that we have a good trust that we've built. So I'm passionate about becoming the sheriff. It's something that I believe wholeheartedly in, and I hope that you will vote for me. Thank you.
Did I turn it off?
All right, I can talk about it though. Also like to thank the Tea Party for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to all of you. Obviously, my name is Jeffery Lower. I am a lifelong resident of Tazewell County. I am a 29-year veteran of law enforcement, and I started my career in 1988 as an auxiliary deputy for Tazewell County Sheriff's Office, which Sheriff Donahue gave me the opportunity back then to start as an auxiliary. And I've moved up through the ranks from that volunteer position through every rank in our department. I've been married for 24 years to my wife and my best friend, Linda. I have 3 daughters two of which are here. And I am a firm believer that I couldn't have done anything throughout my career without the support of my family. And I owe a lot to them. So, like I said, I'm a lifelong resident of Tazewell County, and the Sheriff's Office has been my home for 29 years. I started, as I said, as an auxiliary. I got hired in '91 as a deputy, and I was chosen to help create our field training program and become a field training officer to train new deputies. And in fact, we still use that same program today. In 1999, I was promoted to sergeant, and I was made field training supervisor. So I worked patrol, and I also supervised the field training program. Sheriff Houston put me in charge of the investigations division, where I worked for 5 years, managing and investigating very complex criminal cases. And at 5 years after that, I was promoted to captain, and I was in charge of the patrol division. So, working in the patrol division in 2009, I got the privilege of attending the FBI National Academy. The FBI National Academy is a top-level executive development academy that less than 1% of all law enforcement throughout the world get to attend, and I feel very privileged to be able to attend that academy. Now, I tell new deputy applicants at our orientations that law enforcement, it's not a job, it's not a career, it's a lifestyle choice. It's a choice that we have to live every day, on or off duty. I made that choice 29 years ago, and I've lived by it every day. So, the progression of my career after going through the FBI Academy, the captain, I was promoted to chief deputy in 2010, which is a position that I have today. As chief, I supervise all law enforcement operations within the Sheriff's Office, which includes patrol, investigations, crime prevention, court security. I'm also in charge of all of the security systems within the jail, the courthouse, and all of the county buildings downtown. So, and as chief, I'm also in charge of managing and administering our budget, which is about $10 million. So, I have a very deep connection with the Sheriff's Office. It is my home, and honestly, it's something that I love. The people that work there, well, they're my family. They always have been, and I honestly look forward to going to work every day. So I would hope that I could get the support and the votes to be able to continue my career and stay at the Sheriff's Office, well, who knows how long. My father just retired last year at 87, so I'm only 54, and hopefully I can stick around for another one.
Appreciate it. You can hold on to that. I'll get the first question.
Okay.
All right, good start. So within the statute, there are 3 authorities or responsibilities of the sheriff in Illinois. Those authorities are custodian of the courthouse and jail, conservator of the peace, and supervisor of safety. So we're trying to use our questions to align our core values with those 3 areas of responsibility. Okay? So our first question deals with the core value of fiscal responsibility and the sheriff's responsibility of custodian of the courthouse and jail. Tea parties believe we don't need more taxes. We need less spending. The T in Tea Party is, after all, an acronym for taxed enough already. According to an article in the Journal-Star in October, the sheriff's annual budget has grown from $3.5 million in 2000 to $8.7 million in 2016. Separately, I think you're all aware that a referendum has been placed on the March primary ballot requesting a property tax increase, not for the sheriff's office, but for the county. So, Mr. Lower, if you could limit your answer to the responsibility of custodian of the courthouse and jail, can you explain to us how you will reverse this escalating spending?
Well, I don't think as far as the sheriff's budget, that can be reversed simply because, I don't know if anybody remembers, the previous jail we had was condemned, and we were actually, we were going to have to find someplace else to house prisoners. So the new jail that we built was paid for through public safety sales tax, which there was a public safety sales tax enacted. And one of the agreements to do that was there was a $1 million reduction in property sales tax, in property tax, and that was made up through the sales tax. And that was the agreement, since we didn't want the burden to be on the property owners. It was supposed to be kind of spread around on sales tax that would come from people outside of this country, or outside of the county as well. And as far as the agreement on that, back when it happened, that tax was never supposed to end. That operates our jail. We have a $10 million budget, which is much higher than it was when we had the old jail. The old jail was a dungeon. It was horrible. We built the new jail and had to double the number of corrections we have. So a huge portion of that is because of the salary. So as far as the efficiency and rolling back the taxes for the operation of the facility, the only way that I could see that would happen would be to close the jail, because that is our main cost. That's where the public safety sales tax goes, and nobody wants to do that. So.
So, Mr. Eeten, would you like to question me?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Well, obviously, I believe that I am more of a conservative in the sense of sure that our budgets are lean. One of the things that my opponent said that I agree with is the fact that there are staffing requirements that are there. There is staffing levels. A majority of the budget is contractual when it comes to the cost of labor, and you can't get around that. There are some things that can't be negotiated by the sheriff or even anyone else for that matter, because it is contractual. There are a lot of other spending areas that we can certainly do better in, and I definitely believe that we need to take a good hard look at every area that we spend money in every part of the county, not just the sheriff's office, and we need to look for ways that we can trim that down. And we need to go from this mindset in government of this is something that we really have to we need to figure out, is this something that we really want, or is this something that maybe a new
Just a
microphone?
second.
I would vote for a microphone. I think we need to be responsible when it comes to that. We need to start asking the question: is this something that we need, or is this something that we want? And I think there's a huge difference there. And so, obviously, I think we need to start looking at the budgets and really say, when we're in a crisis time, especially now, I look at the county government, and we're poised to raise taxes. I mean, we just went through this with the state, and it's very frustrating. And now it's frustrating with the county to be poised with the opportunity or the idea that our taxes could, on the county side, raise 30%. And that's not okay. We have to do better. Now, some of it we can't get around, but some of it is because of misspending. It's been, I'll tell you one thing for an example. In the past 2 years, we spent over $250,000 defending the sheriff on lawsuits, on grievances, all kinds of things. We have 14 pending grievances right now. These are things that cost the county money. And we could go through there and we could look at the overtime for the corrections officers, or overtime for the deputies, and we can look at all these different things. But those are issues that we have to really look at and say, we're willing to take a look at it. We're not pointing fingers or pointing the blame at other people, but we have to be able to look at those issues objectively and make decisions and that affect our taxpayers.
At the state and local levels of government, funding pensions is projected to consume more taxpayer dollars than all other spending combined. This looming threat is a significant reason that Illinois has an annual net loss of tens of thousands of taxpayers each year. So, Mr. Eaton, will you commit to outsourcing to the private free market economy as many tasks as possible in order to reduce the threat of out-of-control pension expense?
Just to make sure I understand, can you read that question again, just so I understand what you're...
Will you commit to outsourcing to the private free market economy as many tasks as possible in order to reduce the threat of out-of-control pension expenses?
Well, as far as if you're talking about outsourcing things to the private market, as far as let's take this a step at a time. I think as far as pension goes, when it comes to pensions and things that the state can't pay, I don't disagree with that. I had a conversation with somebody just the other day, and the fact that our pensions in Illinois are severely underfunded. Now, a lot of that is not the fault of the hardworking employees; it's the fault of our state government. In this case, where they are robbing from one fund to pay another fund, and quite frankly, it's happened on the city levels, it's happened on the county or on the state level, where they are robbing pension funds to pay for other things. I have a huge problem with that. As far as cutting down some of our costs that we have, I'm all about making sure that we do the right thing. But as far as something that is set by the state, for instance, pensions, that we don't have any control of, I'm not sure there's really much we can do on that level and from a local standpoint.
Would you like the question repeated?
No, sir.
All right.
Well, as far as the sheriff's office is under IMRF, which is Illinois Mutual Retirement Fund, and Sheriff's Law Enforcement Pension. That is totally separate from the state of Illinois. It is 98% funded, it is healthy, and the counties that pay into it do pay their bills. We've had a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul from different areas of the state, and that's why these pensions have suffered. County pensions are not suffering. They have been paid. They are healthy. In fact, the state wanted IMRF to take over their pensions and try and bring it back up, but I think that was only a ploy to get their hands in it. So as far as the sheriff's pensions and outsourcing to reduce that, they are healthy. I don't think that outsourcing is necessary.
Thank you. So our next question relates to our core value of constitutional government and specifically the Second Amendment. So Mr. Lower, as conservator of the peace, what threats to the Second Amendment concern you, and how will you ensure the right of the citizens in Tazewell County to defend themselves?
Well, I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. They asked me what my opinion was on concealed carry. I am very pro concealed carry. I mean, I believe that anybody that wants to, that can, should take the concealed carry class, should be licensed. It doesn't mean that you have to carry a weapon all the time. You're protecting our rights. Our country was built on the fact that we're allowed to carry weapons, we're allowed to own weapons. And I think it's a protection as far as the concealed carry to keep that from being taken away from us. So as far as the protection of the county, I would encourage anybody that wants to, that can, that at least go through the class, because any education, any firearms knowledge is going to be helpful.
Well, this is pretty calm so far.
I get this question as well. I get it all the time. Do you support concealed carry? 100% I do. I believe, especially now, if you look at the nation that we live in, it's a pretty scary place, right? It's pretty dangerous. And, I think a lot of times we get in this mindset that we're safe. We're in Morton, Illinois. There's nothing that's going to happen here. We're in Washington or Pekin or Hopedale or wherever you live. And the truth of the matter is, I think that every place that you go that has experienced a shooting or an incident, they've probably thought the same thing. They probably thought, this is Newtown. I mean, what's going to happen here, right? And I think that as citizens, you certainly have that right to bear arms. I believe you have the right to concealed carry. Doesn't mean you have to, but you certainly have that right, and I certainly 100% support it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I'm going to change pace a little bit. You'll get the next question. So a couple of questions from the audience, and we still have a couple more prepared ones, but thought it'd be good to change pace. So you're Mr. Eeten, why are you a Republican?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a Republican because I believe in, I would consider myself, like I mentioned earlier, conservative. I believe, and my beliefs align mostly with the Republican belief, the Republican Party. Does that mean that I believe every single Republican that I meet or in line with them? Not necessarily. Do I call myself a Republican? Yes. Am I a Republican? I am. And I'm proud to be.
Thank you. Obviously, we were kind of expecting a little more long-winded answers. I'm glad they're short. We're going to be able to get through a lot more of what's on your mind. So.
All right, why am I Republican? Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
No. I was brought up in a family that was mainly Democrat. And it seems to me that the actual values between the parties have changed. It almost seems like some of the Democratic values have turned Republican. And I've never changed my values, but I guess I've kind of changed my attitude where the party goes. I consider myself a law enforcement professional more than I do aligning myself with a party. Republican Party is more in keeping with what I believe in, the conservative values. I appall public waste, and it just aligns more with what I believe.
Thank you very much. I'll do this from the side and let you. So, Schleier, how are you going to deal with the opioid crisis?
Well, that's something that there is no easy answer, and 2 minutes isn't going to be enough. But that is something that everyone needs to be involved in. Not me, not just this department, not just this area. That needs education, enforcement, changing in attitudes. The biggest thing that is believed now, and I believe it too, is a lot of this came on because of over-prescriptions, over-prescribing drugs. And I've seen it. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it too. The average person, they get hurt. They get on some sort of painkiller. That painkiller's taken away. The body still has that urge, and some people have gone to heroin. Now, what can we do, or what have we done? We've been trying long and hard to try and combat this, working with different agencies. The Sheriff's Office has been on board with the Heroin Initiative, the Peoria Heroin Task Force. There is no simple answer. I was at a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor here about a month ago. They have an initiative going. They're trying to get everyone together. It has to be a combined effort with very specific goals to be able to combat it. And everybody needs to get involved, not just law enforcement, but education, the hospitals. Everybody needs to get on board to try and combat this before we can have any type of real meaningful change.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll keep track.
Thank you. You want this, Mike?
Well, this is obviously a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I've been involved in many years in my role at the police department. And I remember having a conversation with with a couple females in the office who told me that they wanted to start this group called Fight the Fight Awareness. And the idea was because they wanted to work towards bringing awareness to people, because there's such a stigma on what a heroin user looks like, or what a opioid addicted person looks like, you know, and we label them. We like to put them in little categories. And she went on to tell me about her son who had died of an overdose. And you know, it's something that you know, we look at and we see as a problem, and we love to talk about, but we don't like to do a whole lot about it, because as politicians, a lot of times it feels good to say we're doing something, but what are we really going to do, because it's too big of a problem. And I believe wholeheartedly that not only do we need to continue with education, but we have to bring people together, because quite frankly, law enforcement, we can't fix this problem. You know, do we need enforcement? Yes. We need to go after the people that are delivering this drug and these drugs into our community. We need to crack down on these types of things. But we also need to really focus on harm reduction. We need to focus on helping the people that can't help themselves. They're addicted. And until you really grasp how that works, it's hard for us to sit here and understand. I've never done drugs in my life. I've never been addicted to drugs, so it's hard for me to get out of the mindset of just stop. Why don't you just stop doing it? But it's not that easy, and it doesn't work. It's a disease. And it's something that we have to really focus on. We need to bring people together, because this is, like I said, far out of our reach of law enforcement. So when we partner with groups and partner with people, we can do more. We can't fix the problem, and I'm not here to say that Mike Eaton's going to solve the heroin problem in Tazewell County, because I'd be lying to you. But what I can do is bring people together, and we can start a dialogue even more than we're doing now. And I'm not saying we're not doing anything. Don't hear me wrong. But there's so much more that we can do. There's programs that we can even bring into the jail for people who are incarcerated that are fighting withdrawal. And I believe in it wholeheartedly. I really believe that it's law enforcement's time in turn to step up and really take the lead on this, and to encourage people to join this fight with us.
Thank you. I think I got it right. You keep the mic. So our next question deals with our core values of constitutional government and the sheriff's authorities of conservative peace. I was making sure I wasn't reading the same question twice here. And custodian of courthouse jail. On August 28th, 2017, Governor Rauner signed into law Senate Bill 31, the Trust Act. Media reports consistently declared that Illinois is now a sanctuary state, shielding illegal immigrants from the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency known as ICE. Yet the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police says, don't believe a lot of what you're hearing about the Illinois Trust Act, which Governor Rauner signed. It will not make Illinois a sanctuary state, not even close, despite what some critics and headlines are saying. So don't worry, it's not happening, and we are pleased that Governor Rauner signed the bill. So, Mr. Eeten, can you assure the voters of Tazewell County that ICE can check whether illegal aliens are arrested or detained in Tazewell County, that illegal aliens will be detained by Tazewell County when ICE makes the lawful request, and that illegal aliens will be released to ICE when ICE makes the lawful request?
Well, I can tell you that the sheriff is really kind of the doorkeeper with the county, and with what the federal government is going to come in and do. And you know, I have no idea, to be quite frank, what the government is planning on doing. I don't think they know half the time. But as far as Tazewell County, I can assure you that if I'm the sheriff, that I will stand along with these other sheriffs, exactly what they said, and to assure the people in Tazewell County that is not going to happen.
Thank you.
Well, that's another easy question, because I don't agree with sanctuary states. I don't agree with the Trust Act. I don't agree with the what's going on out west, not cooperating with the immigration. I believe in it, and like Mike said, Tazewell County will abide by the federal law, and we will cooperate with immigration.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry for stepping on you there. Forgot I had a hot mic.
No problem.
Okay. So, we've making exceptional good time. You guys happy so far? How about you guys? So far, so good? That's the truth. The first time I've done this, so it's still a little rocky.
You're doing fine.
All right, so the next question from the audience is, what is your position on asset seizure and forfeiture from a person charged but not convicted of a crime?
Charged but not convicted.
Right.
Well, I know there's a lot of asset forfeiture that goes on. There isn't a lot of it that goes on with the sheriff's office. One of the things I personally really don't believe in, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for it, is the tow bills, the seizures, the $500 bill that you get for getting your vehicle towed. And the sheriff's office doesn't do it. The board won't allow it because there has to be an ordinance for it. And as far as the seizures for people that aren't convicted, well, that's not exactly my area. That would be a question for the state's attorney's office. I don't personally believe that somebody that is not convicted should forfeit their property. Now, having said that, depending on the case, depending on the incident, and it may be a plea bargain that they give up their property and still be found not guilty. So, without getting specific to a question, I would say, personally, I believe if you're not convicted, you shouldn't lose your property.
Question repeated?
Nope.
The department I work for, we do quite a few asset forfeitures. And I would have to say that I would agree. I do not believe that on its face that we should take people's property if they are found not guilty, if they're not convicted. Now, like my opponent said, there are other avenues that go along with that. Obviously, if they're if that's part of their plea or what have you, But as far as if they're found not guilty, I don't believe that should be the case.
A lot of agreement there. That's good. Did you answer that one?
Sorry, I didn't say it.
Yeah, I need a secretary. Can you give us an example of a situation when you had to deal with someone you perceived was being unreasonable, irate, or hostile toward you?
Well, I think just about any police officer could say that they've run into that scenario. That happens just about every day anymore. It seems like in law enforcement, we are running against a lot more resistance now. I think that's just kind of the wave of where society is headed. A lot more disrespect, and so there are instances, and I'm trying to think of one in particular because there's so many, but there are times when you run into somebody that isn't compliant. They are very vocal. They love to stick a camera in your face and try to provoke you. And I think the thing is, as law enforcement officers, one of the things we're taught is something called verbal judo, trying to talk people down from a certain situation. And one of the things we always tell new officers is one of the best tools that you have on your belt, or not really on your belt, but the best tools that you have is your mouth. It can either get you in a lot of trouble or it can get you out of a lot of trouble. And I think a lot of times, officers can de-escalate that. And I think sometimes you have to try to, as an officer, put yourself in their shoes too and kind of figure out where they're even coming from so you can understand the anger that they have or maybe their discontentment with law enforcement officers in general. We see kids all the time that grow up hating the police. Why do they hate the police? Well, I'm not sure they can really tell you, other than the fact that their mom or dad told them to hate the police. I remember a specific instance where I was dealing with a situation, and the kid came out and was yelling at his mom and dad, and I made a comment to try to ask him a question, and the dad looks at his son and he says, "Don't listen to him. He's a police officer. Don't ever trust anything that comes out of his mouth." As law enforcement officers, we have to come up with all kinds of ways to try to interact and to engage with people, to try to understand where they're coming from, so we can try to speak some truth into their lives and into the situation.
Question repeated?
No, sir.
All right.
Well, one of the biggest differences between a county department and a city department is geography. I learned this a long time ago. Your backup may be 20, 30 miles away. You better be good with your mouth, because there are people that will, you can talk down, you can talk them down. You have to. And it all comes down to respect. Most people, they just want to be respected. They either want to yell at you, they want to vent, but typically their anger is not towards you. Now, there are those few. I can remember four in my career that it didn't matter what you said to them, they're going to fight with you. And they lost. But in speaking with the average person, especially people that are intoxicated, it takes a lot of patience. So, in that instance, he's right, your mouth is your best tool that you have.
I'll just do this from here.
Yes, sir.
So, Ms. Flower, tell us a major accomplishment you have made with a team of coworkers.
Major accomplishment. Well, how far back you want me to go? The first thing I mentioned as a deputy was creating our field training program. That's something I'm hugely proud of. When I got hired, I had a 2-day field training program. I rode with Charlie Friend and I rode with Frank Dorothy. Charlie showed me where his property was at in Springfield, here in Spring Lake, and Frank yelled at me about putting the car in gear before I stopped going backwards. So, I think it was about 4 years into my career at the department. We meaning me and 4 other deputies, we asked then Sheriff, I think it was Ralph Hodgson, if we could create a training program for the department. And they sent us to field training school, and we came back and we actually wrote the policy, and we're still using that policy and that program today. So that's something I'm pretty proud of.
I would have to say that probably the heroin initiative is something that that I'm pretty proud of, that I was very much involved with, the chief of police at Pekin and several others. We sat down and we talked about many different ways that we can come up with ways to not only help the people in Pekin, but what can we do that's going to really make a difference. And one of the things that we did put together is a series of videos that we called the Faces of Heroin. And we felt like we needed to give the public an idea of what exactly this looks like, right? I can get up and tell you all kinds of stuff about it. We can have somebody else get up that may be an expert, but what does that really mean? We need to hear it from somebody who has really suffered through an addiction. And so we produced this video series, and really it was a team effort. I mean, we worked on it together and worked with not only other officers at the department, but with other people outside of the department, and we came up with a series that ended up being shared throughout the state and recognized. And so I was very proud of that. I certainly don't take sole credit for that, but it was something that I felt like together we did, and another example of how we work together to make a difference.
Thank you. So the next question from the audience, what characteristics will you look for in sheriff deputies and in county jailers?
Well, I think, one of the biggest things that you have to look at is you have to look at somebody who you feel is going to not only be able to do the job physically, but mentally. I think one of the aspects that we sometimes miss as law enforcement officers, and speaking as one, I can tell you, sometimes you become a little jaded, right? You see situations that come up, and it just becomes kind of something that you see all the time. And one of the things that I see, especially in some of our younger officers, and I make sure to tell them and to recognize in them, is that I see compassion and empathy, or at least compassion and kind of some understanding, right? Because I think as a police officer, especially in our ever-changing world, like my opponent said, you have to learn to use your mouth, but you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes, understand where they're at, what's driving the behavior, and I think police officers nowadays, we need to be able to find somebody who grasps the big picture. It's not just strapping on a badge and a gun and saying, let's go arrest everybody. I remember my first day on the job, it kind of felt, it was fun, But at the end of the day, there's far more things to do than to go out and get in car chases and have guns pulled on you. It's much more than that. It's about really understanding what's going on. And the young officers today, that's something that we have to make sure that we look at, that they can see kind of, farther than their nose. They have to look out and see the people that are looking back at them.
The second part of the question dealt with jailers.
Jailers, corrections officers, I would say the same thing. I think the corrections officers, they have to have an understanding. When the corrections officers are dealing with inmates, I can't imagine. I'll tell you right now, as a police officer, we drop people off, and sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, I'm glad they're out of my car, because that person was not nice, and spitting and kicking and everything else. But once we do that, then it's the corrections officer's job, to take care of them. And I'll tell you what, they have a tremendous job, because there's been times when I've taken people into the jail and the corrections officers have responded appropriately, and they're able to calm them down and to speak to them. And I think that is a very important part as well. It goes along the same lines as police officers, being able to have compassion, understanding, but yet to be firm. Because let's face it, as police officers, corrections officers, you can have all the compassion you want, but you still have to be firm and show people that the rules are the rules and we have to follow.
Thank you.
Well, law enforcement has changed a lot since I was hired. There are a lot more stipulations, there are a lot more regulations, there are a lot more unfunded mandates that are put in place by the state. But I'm involved with hiring deputies, and this applies to corrections, either one. There's only one word, there's only one characteristic that I believe is the most important thing to hiring somebody to work within the sheriff's office, and that's integrity.